Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm Jeff Howe, joined by Gerry Hamilton. Time for this week's edition of the Recruiting Breakdown. And Jerry, every time we have the Recruiting Breakdown here on the channel, it's brought to you by our good friend Mark Saunders.
Man, yeah, we need a lot of Mark Saunders in our life right now. We're having collisions and on Saturdays on the football field in the chat. When it comes to protecting all your stuff, wouldn't it be great to have one place that protects it all? I need some protection right now. Here's some good news. Texas All-State agent Mark Saunders serves Austin and Round Rock and the entire state of Texas. That means he's the only insurance agent you'll need. Everything from your home, car and boat to your motorcycle, RV. Oh, it's hunting season and your ATV. Call Texas All-State agent Mark Saunders' office today, 512-218-8571. Are you in good hands? Well, you'll be in great hands with the over 35 years of experience that Texas alum Mark Saunders brings to the table. Again, Austin, Round Rock area, entire state of Texas. Give him a call, 512-218-8571.
Jerry, one exercise that's been used in the chat, we've seen it over at ontexasfootball.com. Obviously, we get hit with it on social media, is, hey, anytime there's a coaching opening, what could that look like for Texas in the portal? But rather than look at Penn State or Florida or UCLA or Arkansas and what could be in the portal, Jerry, as you've watched this season play out and we're beyond the halfway point of the regular season and we're seeing these coaching jobs come open, which means you're going to have some roster volatility. What do you think Texas is either going to, or where do you expect them to look for help in the transfer portal when the time comes January 2nd?
Yeah, so I think a lot how the rest of the season plays out will have an impact on some things. But look, Cedric Baxter's continue to have the injury issues, right? And Jarrett Gibson hit the portal. So if you can find a piece at running back in the portal that can fit more of a downhill running attack, I think that would be useful, with the caveat that I think James Simon's really good. And I think as time goes on, he's going to be a really good player. And then if you look, obviously, what happens on offensive line is going to be what everybody's going to ask about. You know, the question becomes, how many positions are actually going to, depending on how the season plays out, how many positions are really up for grabs? Mm-hmm. You know, Trevor Gooseby is a first-year starter at left tackle. Nick Brooks is now a first-year starter at left guard. Brandon Baker's a first-year starter at right tackle. Everybody knows those guys will improve the more they play football and the more starts they get under their belt. Center, obviously, Cole Hudson's a senior. There's a possibility Connor Robertson returns. Daniel Cruz, a young player they really like, who I do think has athletic ability and physicality. Right guard, DJ Campbell gone. The answer there, nobody knows, right? So I think offensive line will definitely be looked at deeper than what it was last year. And last year, Texas went after Pregnon, the guard that went from USC to Oregon. So it's not like they didn't look, but I think they were happy with a lot of the pieces they had. Now, what will be the outcome after the season? So I think you look there, obviously. And wide receiver, look, it depends on if anybody goes pro or anybody leaves out of this group. I mean, that's the whole key. There's only so much NIL allotment you can have at these positions. So a lot's going to come down to the decisions a kid may make that's a starter, or versus the decision a staff may make, whether you want to re-up a kid that's a starter. So there's a lot that's going to play into it. But I think all those positions are on the table. And defensively, I think, one thing you'll look at is at corner. If Manny Muhammad goes pro, as, many will expect, you lose both of your starting corners. Cape Phillips has a lot of upside. Where are you at with some of the younger guys? Santana Wilson, Warren Roberson, a guy redshirting Caleb Chester. Where are you at with that young talent? Where does Grayson Littleton stay at nickel? So there's so many things Texas has to look at. I think linebacker is one. So you expect Anthony Hill to go pro, right? Until he announces, we say expect, and the season plays out. Trey Moore will be gone, right? I mean, Brad Spence has another year. He's played more edge than linebacker. So linebacker could be a position you look at. Defensive line, look, it depends on how many of those interior guys leave. I mean, Cole Brevard will be gone. Travis Shaw's gone unless they go to a straight 5-year rule. So he would be gone. Hero Kanu, you can get back for another year. Levon Johnson, you can bring back. So Murad Watson should be back, right? I mean, you should want to bring him back for another year. So edge, Ethan Burke, obviously, unless a 5-year rule goes through, which I don't think it's going to go through in time right now. But so you got to you're going to look at all those positions. Edge, I think, is a strength of this program. Another thing is, where's Justice Terry? Where does he factor in long term?
Yeah.
So there's so many things you're going to look at. But if you're naming them, I think offensive line will be looked at. I think running back will be looked at. I think wide receiver could be looked at. I think a linebacker, corner, and defensive line, depending on how many of those guys leave, will be looked at, even though they really like Myron Charles and Josiah Sharma. It's about depth. So I think that's where – and by the way, kicker. Even though Jake Collette's having a really good senior year, he's ripping off 53-yarders with room to spare, he's still a true freshman kicker. Punter, obviously, Bukowskis is really, really talented, but these are senior experienced kicker punter for Texas right now. So they could look at kicker as well.
Gerry, I want you to adjust your hat. You're suddenly in the player personnel department at Texas. You're sitting around the round table with Sark and Brandon Harris and the coaching staff. What is the balance you think these staff, and I'm talking about the schools like Texas and Georgia and Ohio State that continue to recruit high school prospects at an elite level. What is the balance between trusting your player development that your guys are going to get better, as opposed to let's go into the portal and get something that he may not have as high of a ceiling as one of our internal guys, but he may be more ready right now. What's that balance like, you think, for staff?
I think it's a really tough balance. I think the easiest thing to say is, oh, just go to the portal and fix a need. But I don't know. I think it's the toughest question to answer, honestly, in college athletics right now, especially football, is player development is still number one. You still have to have a high number of high school prospects on your team, and you have to develop those guys. And the only way you can recruit those guys is if they see the only way you can recruit the class of 27 and 28 is if they see young players developing and they see freshmen playing. I mean, so there's such a balance there. Without the high school being the biggest part of it, you're just going to be a turnstile. I mean, and that's the hardest thing to do is Ohio State, Georgia, they take portal guys, but they are high school recruiting development dependent. The second you start taking too many portal guys is the second those younger kids in high school say, man, they don't really have any guys like me starting early or playing that much early. And that's when you get into issues in football. Basketball is a little different, right? But for football, that's a big deal in recruiting. It has to be high school recruiting and development. It has to start there. And then you have to be very careful, I think, how many portal guys you take year in, year out, because I'm going to say it for a third time, but I think it rings true. High school kids and their parents and their circles they're looking. They don't care how many portal players you want to recruit. They care about how many young players are actually on the field and developing. And that's where it gets really difficult.
Gerry, we'll talk about some of the coaching changes right now in college football, just as it relates to some of the stuff Texas has been up to in terms of offering guys. Another former UCLA commit has been offered. We know Kendall Gerville is out there. Gerry, where do you think the chances? And I know everybody's targeting, you look at the Florida roster. Well, Dallas Wilson would be nice to have. But Gerry, isn't this why you beef up your player personnel department? Look, Sark and the staff, they've got to win games, but you've also got to have guys that are looking at those rosters at what's going to be available in the portal. Yeah,
it almost has to be like an NFL scouting department, right? You need to have guys who are watching the college games and setting up your draft board. Well, that's kind of what the portal is. You're setting up your draft board based on needs and watching all these teams play, and especially being on top of the rosters when there's a coaching change. I mean, look, I know the pie in the sky wants out there, Jaden Baugh and Dallas Wilson. And now let's go back to the two Michigan D tackles that were going to transfer out that never happened. Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams, will they transfer out? Never happened. So I think that's the reality is far different from the pie in the sky wants, right? But that is where your scouting department has to do a great job. And I think Texas has done a really good job in the portal. I mean, you look at the players in the portal on this team. Look at the players in the portal on past teams. I think Texas has done – first year, throw out the first year. You're trying to rebuild a program at that point. But let's just take the last 3 years. I think they've done a really good job in the portal. And now that's where this recruiting in-house staff has to be. They have to be your NFL player personnel department, and it has to be the trickle down there. They have to be on top of all these jobs that open. They have to be on top of the agents, speaking with agents potentially on which kids may enter, fielding those agent calls. Hey, my guy's thinking about entering the portal. Do you have any interest here? Because that's where a lot of this stuff begins. So I think that's where why you have these big staffs is if you don't have a big staff, you have a tough time in the portal nowadays.
Yeah, and Jerry, I think it's a tribute to a guy like Kenny Baker, but you talk about Texas doing a good job in the portal. Look, Hero Canu's been better than I expected him to be. We kind of knew what they were getting with Cole Brevard. Murad Watson, I know he's been banged up lately, but he's been impactful. So, yeah, the guy – that first class, like you said, they just needed bodies at that point. They're just trying to fill out a roster just so you can run some 11-on-11 in camp. Texas is in a very different spot right now in terms of how their roster is constructed. But Jerry, let's talk about the high school recruits for some of these open jobs. Let's start with Florida and Kendall Gerville. We've talked a lot about Gerville here on the channel and on this show specifically. Long before Billy Napier's fate was sealed, Texas was still involved with Kendall Gerville.
Yeah, they were. And even after an ACL injury. And again, Sark, those guys stay on their top targets. We've talked about this for years now since that 2022 recruiting class. How, yes, they go out and make senior evals. We're going to get to a Torrey Davis and a Braylon Hodge offer, kind of like Grayson Littleton as a senior and a couple of others, and a reclass guy like Zealous Hicks. But they also stay on their top guys. There's a reason they love these guys as much as they do. And a Kendall Gerville, I think, was seen as such a good fit, along with being a really good player. Even though he had an ACL injury that missed all of his senior year, save one game, Texas has continued to recruit him just as hard as they did pre-injury. And we've been saying we think there's a pretty good chance that Gerville could show up on campus in November. Well, I think obviously those odds go up. But now, before, I think it was just Texas and Florida. Now what happens with Gerville? Does Miami come in there? Who else might have an opportunity to come in there now that Billy Napier's been relieved of his duties? Because I think even had Billy Napier made it through this year, Texas was still recruiting Gerville anyways. It had nothing to do with before the Florida change because they didn't know it was going to happen at the beginning of the season. So Kendall Gerville's a guy that they've had targeted for a while, and they'll continue to have him targeted. And that'll be interesting to see. But I'd be a little surprised as of today if we don't see him in Austin in November.
And Jerry, you mentioned Torrey Davis. Let's talk about him. This is the second former UCLA commit that Texas has offered that was a part of Deshaun Foster's recruiting class. Your thoughts on Torrey Davis? This is, probably at the time we're recording this, like probably 12 to 16 hours fresh that the offer has been confirmed. But what are your initial thoughts on this offer, Jerry?
A really good playmaker, really good ball skills. I think he's got some just instinct for football is what he shows. Now, he doesn't play against fast players. So on the tape, that's pretty obvious. But again, he picked UCLA over Utah. Pretty good staff evaluating defensive backs and defensive players over the years. Kansas State, Oklahoma State. Those were his 4 OVs. Since he decommitted from UCLA September 22nd, Iowa offered. Well, they've done pretty well in evaluation over the years. Wisconsin, he made an OV to Wisconsin. Washington offered him yesterday after Texas. Texas is more targeting November 22nd. That's when Braylon Hodge, the linebacker from Cherry Creek, is scheduled to make his OV. That is when Texas is trying to push for Micah Smith, the other former UCLA commit, the offensive tackle out of Vero, who I think is an Ohio State lean unless he gets on campus at Texas. But Texas is really trying to push that November 22nd. A lot of it's going to come down to who is in the playoffs and where and when. But Torrey Davis, really good players, having a monster senior season. I think he's got 1,500 yards of offense, multiple interceptions. He scored 7 touchdowns in a game, and I think he had 2 interceptions in the same game. So I think he's having a tremendous senior season. I think he's a nickel safety type player with size, 6'1", 185. His dad played at Colorado from 94 to 97, so he's probably made an appearance in Austin at some point for the Buffaloes. This kid's a really good football player. And again, we haven't heard of a visit date yet because the offer just went out, and that was Mark Orfe, the corners coach, which is interesting where the offer came from. But we do know that Texas has been targeting November 22nd Arkansas game with all their kind of remaining targets that are seniors. We'll see if a Fairview, if they're not playing deep into a playoff or something, you could always get them on campus earlier in November, maybe November 1st. But we'll see in the next few days what comes out about a visit date.
All right, Jerry, one more time, let everybody know about our wonderful sponsor here on the Recruiting Breakdown. That's our good friend, Mark Saunders.
Yeah, when it comes to protecting all your stuff, well, Mark Saunders is the guy. He'll protect all of it. One-stop shop. And if you're in the Austin or Round Rock area, the entire state of Texas, he's the only insurance agent you'll need. Your home, your car, your boat, your motorcycle, RV, and ATV for hunting season. Call Texas All-State agent and Texas alum Mark Saunders' office today, 512-218-8571. This is our On Texas Football guarantee. You'll be in great hands with the over 35 years of experience that Texas alum Mark Saunders provides you, Texas fans. Just tell him where you heard about him from, On Texas Football. He loves that. He's got a lot of business from On Texas Football community over the last couple of years. Again, give him a call, 512-218-8571.
Jerry, I know we've talked a lot about this on the channel. We've talked a lot about this on the show. The need to, and again, we talked about in relation to Kendall Graville, the need to, hey, if a guy's a top guy on your board, just keep recruiting him because you never know what might happen. As we wrap up the football portion of this discussion, with all the coaching volatility, I mean, we talked about just the jobs that are open.
Yeah.
Mike Norvell doesn't look good for his future at Florida State. Sharon Moore for this week seems like he's okay at Michigan. We got a lot of people nationally saying maybe LSU should just pay the buyout for Brian Kelly. But Jerry, as we go through so much coaching volatility, is it more important now than ever to just stay on your top targets because you never really know what might happen?
Yeah, take Malachi Lee, for instance. When he's committed to Michigan from Kamehameha High in Honolulu. Kyle Flood and Texas have not backed off of him one bit. Look, and there's part of that is you never know what's going to happen at Michigan. Just hang around the rim, see what happens, see if you can get him back on campus. But yeah, I think it's just as important as ever to stay on these top guys because there is so much volatility right now. And look, Jeff, I think it's going to get worse. I don't think it's going to get better in college athletics. I think we're entering a vicious coaching carousel cycle in college sports, football, basketball, because the salaries are so extreme now, not extreme, but they're known and they're going up and up. A lot of NIL player numbers out there as far as salaries go. And then the portal creates instant super duper gratification. So like the window used to be, Jeff, these guys got 4 years and we'll see, we're going to give him 4 years to build up his program and kind of those days are gone, man. It's like, and so, yeah, it's more important than ever to stay on your guys. And here's the other thing too, because of all this coaching volatility, the guys you really like, you have to stay on them until signing day because they may enter the portal a year from now and you may want them still.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of recruiting now.
Yeah, I've said this for a while, Jerry, and I think it's more important now than ever. It has never been more important to finish second in a recruitment than it is right now. So just keep that in mind as Texas. They won't win all these battles, but maybe you get a guy in the portal a year, 18 months from now, whatever the case is. Jerry, let's finish this up with some hoops. As we sit here right now, about 3 weeks away from the start of the signing window. We know Bo Ogden is in the fold, but as we get closer and for Sean Miller, it's time to start shifting focus toward the start of the season, that Duke game on November 4th. But Jerry, what's the Texas staff trying to get done before that signing window starts?
Yeah, so I think there's two guys really hyper-focused right now, and it doesn't mean they're the only two guys, but look, it's Austin Gooseby and it's Cameron Williams, the 6'11", five-star power forward out of Phoenix St. Mary's, who I think is a tremendous prospect. I think Texas remains in a good spot for Gooseby now. He is going to go show up at BYU and watch the North Carolina game as of today, and he may go out to Charlotte and watch Texas and Duke. I do think Texas remains the favorite. We'll see if anything changes as we get closer to signing day here. That one's going to drag on, I think, in the early November. As of right now, that Texas-Duke game is November 4th. So as long as those plans remain the same, then that recruitment's probably going to closer to November 7th or 8th. Cameron Williams has wrapped up his official visits, and all the intel that I've heard on this says it's Arizona, where he was at last weekend, obviously from Phoenix, St. Mary's, in Texas with Duke in the picture. I know he visited USC. I don't think that's happening. I think the Ratliff twins are probably leaning to USC over Alabama, so that would take USC out of the picture for a 6'11" skilled power forward, because that's what the Ratliffs are. And there's 2 of them. So I think it's really Gooseby and it's really Cameron Williams right now. And I think Texas has leads for Gooseby, and I think they have a real opportunity with Cameron Williams. And I think at that point, if Texas got both those guys, they're done with the high school level. Now, what happens if a Darren Rippey, who Texas is involved with, decides, I'm going to raise my hand for Texas? Well, then that changes the game a little bit for Texas. And I still don't think they'd take 4. I think they take 3 high school players because there's also the NIL allotment, how many you want to take from the high school level. But I think Gooseby and Cameron Williams is 1 and 2 for them right now. I think if Darren Rippey just unexpectedly raised his hand, and I think Texas is in the hunt for him, but if he unexpectedly raised his hand, in my estimation, then they're not going to turn him down. But then that would kind of shift some focus in high school recruiting for them. So we'll see what happens. But I think the name is Austin Gooseby, and the second name is Cameron Williams right now.
And one more time, just a shameless plug here on the channel. Jerry and I did a special edition of On Texas Basketball a couple of weeks ago. Half-hour interview with Sean Miller. Jerry, no fluff in that interview either. It's straight hoops.
It was straight hoops, and everything we've heard since then is that was Sean Miller loved that interview. So hopefully we'll be able to get him back on the channel during the season at some point. But yeah, if you haven't listened to that, Sean Miller talks analytics with Jeff. He talks about international recruiting with Jeff and I. He breaks down every player. By the way, Texas beat SMU 89-83, was up 87-77 with 2 minutes left when Texas kind of stopped attacking offensively. SMU hit a couple of late threes, and they did it without Matas or Lucina, who both are okay. They're both expected to play in the opener. Texas beats SMU in a scrimmage. Their second scrimmage coming up is against TCU Saturday in Fort Worth. Then, man, we're a week away.
No doubt. It feels good to get excited about Texas basketball again. So
it's going to be a good product. The fans are going to like the product. Is it a finished product this year? No. Are they going to like the product? Absolutely.
Not finished, Jerry, but it's going to be fun to watch this team as they grow and evolve and develop and get ready for what should be another brutal schedule in the SEC.
January's rough.
Absolutely. Jerry, thanks for the knowledge and expertise as always. Thank you to Matthew behind the scenes for producing it. Thank you to our good friend Mark Saunders, Allstate, for sponsoring it. If you're not a member, over at ontexasfootball.com, get over to the site. You can get all kinds of recruiting news, notes, and nuggets. We got basketball. We got the football coverage, everything you want to know going on the 40 acres. Sign up using the promo code OTFOG. That'll get you 1 year of access at ontexasfootball.com for $39.95. Also, make sure that you like this video and that you're subscribed to the On Texas Football YouTube channel. That way, whether it's here on the channel or on the site, you're not missing any of our coverage of everything happening on the 40 acres. For Jerry, for Matthew, for the entire On Texas Football staff, I'm Jeff Howe. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And until next time, hook 'em.